Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today we have a brand new Marvel Future Fight tier list for 5.2 featuring the new characters, the new uniforms, and for the first time ever, a brand new tier. Please welcome your starting five for the Toronto Raptors. No, for the Omega tier, we have the following 5 characters. We'll get to the explanation for these 5 characters in just a second, but before we start, the classic tier list PSA for everybody out there watching for the first time, and maybe if you have a bad memory for the second or third time. These opinions that you're about to hear and see expressed are my opinions. They are not necessarily a hard and fast guide on what you should be investing in the game. These are just how I see things. You can definitely value characters differently than I do, and I encourage you to use your own thinking and your own conclusions when it comes to characters. You may disagree with me, that's totally cool, but this is just how I see things, and I think this is a general way of assessing characters in terms of their overall power level. And then there's a lot of helpful information here that doesn't really have to do with my opinions, stuff that has to do with the legend at the top, and then just other things about like type and possibly characters that are around the same power level, more or less. And so we'll talk about everything. We're going to talk about the new characters that are first timers to the list. We're going to talk about characters that got uniforms, aka buffs, and we're going to talk about a few other characters that shifted around. Every character that I'm going to be talking about right now has been bolded, so you can also just use that as a quick and dirty way of figuring out who's next. But to start, we got to talk about the 5 bad boys and girls making up the Omega tier. And basically, I thought of introducing a new tier above Mythic because there's just such a large gap, but especially recently with characters like Jean Grey and Doctor Strange, between those 2 characters specifically and basically everyone else in the Blast class and almost every other character in the game. And I think the best way of explaining what an Omega tier character is in Marvel Future Fight, as far as I understand them, and as far as I want to express them, these are characters that completely dominate multiple areas of the game. And not only do they completely dominate multiple areas of the game, i.e. they're, you know, among the best characters in all of PvE content or all of PvP content, but on top of that, and this is the important part for me, is you can build them one way, but they will still be able to do stuff on the other side of the game. So for example, if you build Spider-Man for PvP, which is arguably the best way to build him, he's going to be very bad for PvE. Now, he might not be very bad in your opinion, but in my opinion, he will be very bad. He'll be very weak, and he won't be able to clear many high stages of World Boss, or do high stages of Shadowland, for example, like 80+, or get a high score in ABX or whatever. For these characters here, that is the case. So you can build, for example, it doesn't necessarily go both ways, but it goes at least one way. You can build a Deadpool with a CTP of Regen or a CTP of Authority or some sort of defensive obelisk, and he still has such incredible PvE power that he can do PvE content. Conversely, you can build Jean Grey and Doctor Strange for PvE. You can give them a CTP of Rage or other obelisks or with damage procs, and they're not necessarily going to be as good. They're not going to necessarily be number 1, but they're going to still be very, very dominant. You can still get tons of kills and tons of wins in the vast majority of content. Now, of course, there is no character in the game that is perfectly balanced and perfectly equal in PvE and PvP with completely different setups and completely different obelisks or CTPs. It's impossible. Giving someone a CTP of Rage means they're going to be worse for PvP because they don't have guard break immunity. But whereas other characters will struggle in PvP with a CTP of Rage, these characters can still perform very well, maybe, you know, close to 90% of their original production, even though they're rocking PvE builds and vice versa for PvP builds and PvE content. So that is, in my opinion, what makes an Omega tier character. The ability to do both even when the build does not match the game mode, i.e. PvE versus PvP and vice versa. And these characters are just bustedly OP. And if you go back and you look at all of the other characters in the tier below, the tier that they should be in, you can see that there's a humongous gap between these characters. I mean, Thanos and Captain Marvel, who's the next best one? Doctor Doom. He's not even close to Thanos and Captain Marvel in almost every game mode that you compare them to, so there's just this gigantic gap. The only character that's really of any issue or any kind of questionable value is Deadpool among these 5. And the reason for that is that Deadpool has, among these 5, the lowest value for PvP. he still has value for PvP. He's still, around the top 10 for PvP, but definitely a lot lower than these other 4 characters. So I would say that I think if you disagree with Deadpool, or if you think Deadpool should be here, or if you possibly think that perhaps Luna Snow should be next to Deadpool, you're not entirely wrong. I will say that Deadpool is probably the least deserving of these 5 for this list. For this tier of Omega, but I still think he gets by on his completely disgustingly dominant PvE performance, and the fact that he's a great counter still, not a perfect counter, but he's, once in a while counter to a lot of the blast characters that are coming out and dominating the meta. With that being said, let's move on from the Omega tier because it's only 5 characters. They're super expensive. They're all tier 3. Let's see who else we're talking about here. So big introductions to the newest members of the Speed Mythic tier. We're talking Ant-Man. We're talking Spider-Man 2099. And Ant-Man, while he didn't necessarily make it, he was near the top of the Legendary tier before. I think you got to give the guy props. Now, whether you want to put him above or below Spider-Man 2099 is up to you. You could kind of shuffle him around, but he has shown the staying power, and he has shown the ability to consistently deal with most of the metas in the PvP right now, in the PvP realm. So that is definitely something to take note of, on top of the fact that he can do up to stage 50 for certain world bosses, and he can go even higher for Corvus specifically. So he has that dual power, and you can build him kind of 50-50. In my case, I have a CTP of Destruction on him, and I'm able to do both stages of content because he has that, super powerful tier 2 passive, but then he's got the damage proc, and he's got the huge hit on 5 to really make things worth it overall. So props to Ant-Man for being there. Spider-Man 2099 as well, insane PvE power with the all defense down, and then that long iframe just dominates for PvP. Wolverine, really quickly, I just moved him down 1 from Mr. Fantastic. Just don't see much of him in PvP anymore, so he has less value in PvE compared to Mr. Fantastic, so he kind of deserves to be there. A bit of a big shakeup for blast types. I decided to move Invisible Woman down to the Legendary tier just because she's not really being used in either game mode as much, and she, she's good, but just not at that next level. I also moved Magneto down, and I moved Iron Man up. Now, if you guys paid attention to the last tier list, or if you watched the last tier list, I had originally said that we need to put Iron Man in the Legendary tier to force Netmarble to rework him. Well, they have said that they're going to be reworking him, and I trust that even though I'm putting him in Mythic here, and this is a more accurate gauging of his power with the CTP of Rage specifically, I think that hopefully Netmarble will rework him enough that we can possibly drag him up here, by the end of July. So we'll have to wait and see, but this is probably a more accurate and probably my most accurate ranking for these 2 characters. Magneto takes a couple of hits because he's really only used in ABX right now, and GBR, and a little bit of Shadowland, but that's really not too much, and his PvE value is a bit weak otherwise, and he basically has no PvP value like Iron Man. For the universal types, I did move Victorious up 1 because she's seen a huge resurgence in her PvP use. I also moved Nova and Anti-Man completely off the Mythic tier. I think they're just not worthy to stand around with these level 70s and these tier 3s, so I moved them down. I put Corvus in between because Corvus does have some dual PvP, PvE action, whereas Anti-Man is strictly for PvE, and while he's still good, he's falling behind in a lot of content. He just can't put out the same numbers. He's only level 60, no uniform, so that's really lacking. Going back up to the top of Legendary tier, a lot of you guys are going to argue and probably, get rustled and upset that Spider-Man is not in the Mythic tier, but I just haven't seen any proof. And I know I'm hating a bit on Spider-Man's uniforms. I don't think they did him enough justice. I think they need to be buffed, and man, yeah, I haven't seen anything. I hear whispers. I hear people saying, "Oh, Spider-Man this, Spider-Man that," but I don't see any proof. I don't see any high-level clears. I don't see any PvP takedowns recorded against good teams that have verified builds, and not goofy shit like I'm webbing up this team because they don't use debuff. Of course, Spider-Man's going to dominate that team. On the flip side, Nick Fury continues to see play in PvP, so you got to give the guy respect. He's a solid PvE character, and he's seeing some counterplay as a speed type in PvP, so we got to put him up here, and he's helping teams quickly dispatch Thanos and Doctor Doom and Strife because of his extra damage against villains. So that's a really cool way of synergizing with his passive in PvP, which we hadn't seen much until recently. The rest of combat class and the rest of this is kind of the same. We just have a new entry here, Electro. He's pretty much, I would say, a pretty similar copy to Miles Morales. He's a bit on the fragile side, but he hits pretty hard when you can line things up properly. But he's kind of an awkward character to play. He's not very smooth, and he doesn't have like a really nice, easy to easy to track and easy to time combo. Over on the rest of the Blast class, we have, of course, the Rise of Mysterio. I think he's right around Iceman and Rescue's level of power, maybe a little bit more damage, a little bit less survivability. Remember, Rescue has that crazy heal, so don't count her out. And Iceman has pretty bonkers damage as well, although he doesn't have the heal. So maybe Iceman, it should be moved down. Maybe Mysterio and Rescue moved up, but who knows? But I think he's in a really nice place in kind of the mid to bottom tier of Legendary. These are very, very good characters here, and I don't think he's being snuffed, by being there. Hydro Man, on the other hand, makes it to about upper middle of heroic tier. I think he's maybe a little bit better than Star-Lord in some cases, but a little bit worse in other cases. Remember, Star-Lord has a lot of value for something like Alliance Conquest because he can chain all those iframes. Molten Man makes it to the top of heroic tier just because the combat class is pretty weak. Pretty much the only combat type that's really going to give Molten Man a run for his money is Warpath, so I could kind of shuffle those around. Keep in mind, Molten Man, you can definitely use a fire damage proc Obelisk instead of a CTP. At the bottom here of Universal, I also made quite a few changes. So we moved Dormammu over to rare tier because, man, he stinks. And then we shuffled around a lot of the characters. So we dropped Loki down substantially. I had him way too high. Bumped Sentinel and Morgan Le Fay up. Sentinel's got a great leadership, solid for GBR as a lead and some PvP action. And then Morgan Le Fay is also quite good as a universal villain. She's got the all defense down. She's got the mind control, revive, etc. She's got a lot of weapons as well. And then just shuffled around Ronan, Hyperion, and Medusa just a little bit more to accurately reflect the combination of leadership, support, and base stat buffs and sort of skills that they have to make them powerful characters. But otherwise, we kept this pretty similar. Just a couple of changes here to more accurately reflect that the power level difference between a level 70 and a level 60 character. We also did that for Sandman. We moved him up one spot. Actually, it wasn't me. It was Twitch chat. They helped me a lot with this, so thank you, Twitch chat. Because he got level 70, we think he's better than Iron Fist now, and I would probably agree. Better than Goliath? I don't know about that, but probably better than Sandman. I think Goliath can get to level 70. No, I don't think he can. I can just check right now when I can open up this list here. So let me just scroll down real quick to Goliath and find him. Vulture can get level 70. No, Goliath cannot get level 70. So yeah, maybe he should be above Goliath as well. Let me know in the comments if you think Sandman should go up one more spot under Killmonger. And then finally, last but not least, not too much of a important thing here, but we moved Agent 13 and Drax out of the toilet tier because they have some limited value now in low-level Shadowland. You can combo their immunity skills to give infinite immunity, and you can cheese a very low level with them at tier 2 with minimal builds and minimal effort as long as you can kill them in 3 minutes, because you'll basically never die because those stages don't have immunity or immunity penetration, and you can just keep spamming the immunity on a chain to get infinite immunity for 3 minutes straight. So there is value there as we push on to stage 130. So that has been the updated MFF Marvel Future Fight 5.2 tier list. Let me know what you think. I expect some blowback on possibly Luna Snow, possibly Spider-Man, possibly Iron Man, Magneto. I don't know. But yeah, hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think. I always love to read your thoughts. And if enough of you really agree that a certain character shouldn't be in a certain place or should be, and you have proof, I can always hotfix this after a few hours. I've done it before, and I'm not afraid to do it again. So I'm listening to you guys and to you girls and to everybody else talking. Hit me up in the comments down below. Subscribe if you enjoyed the content and you want to support me. Go see Far From Home. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you later today. Take care.